Hello, Facebook. I am back for another webinar, another Facebook Live. And I'm just going to give it a minute or two for people to log on and to be able to join us. And let me just check this is broadcasting in the group. Yes, it is. And this was something we were planning on doing last week, but we rescheduled it to today. So that we could put the event out and have more people join us today. And this is one that I'm really looking forward to, and I enjoy having a range of different guests on these Facebook lives that I do. And today I'm joined by Rich Habets. Hi, Rich.
Hi, Ankush.
So I'm gonna big you up a little bit. You might not like it. Maybe you'll correct me and pretend to be humble. But so from my side, Rich is someone who is very, very successful in terms of what he does. Rich works predominantly with corporate clients. In fact, I think that's all you do. And also works at what I believe is kind of a very senior level. I believe the correct term is C-suite. You work with the C-suite individuals, kind of board level members. And what Rich does is, I believe, again, correct me if I'm wrong, but you are really working from a three principles understanding, or that informs a large part of your work.
Correct. Yes.
So I think it would be fair to say you are quite unusual in terms of our community, in terms of you're working with very senior people within organizations. You're working with large organizations, and and not to put it bluntly, you're making good money doing it, right?
Yeah, I think all of them are correct. Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
Absolutely true.
And whilst it would be nice to say, well, everyone's doing that, I think, to be honest and to be fair, that is unusual. That is unusual, and I know you are highly sought after. You get referrals, and people talk about your work and hire you in. You aren't someone who has a huge social media following. You're not doing a whole load of marketing, and you're also relatively new to coaching. I mean, you've from this understanding, you've not been doing this for 3 decades and sat at the feet of Sydney Banks or anything like that, right? You kind of started your coaching practice 7 years ago, was it? Something like that?
Well, it's 2019, so 2009, so 10 years ago.
10 years ago. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's kind of my understanding of you and your business and what you do. And I think the group and all of us can learn an awful lot from this. So I'm very excited to do this Facebook Live today, because and I'm really appreciative of your time. I know how busy you are, because I think we can all learn from. You're obviously doing something right, and doing well. So that's kind of my background. But maybe a good place to start, because I don't know how many people know of you, is maybe in your own words, if you can give us a little bit of a background in terms of where were you kind of 10 years ago, in your business, and kind of, was it really simple? Did you just hang your shingle out, as George Pransky says, and clients started flocking to you? Did it take some time? What was that journey like?
Well, in 2009, I had 0 clients, actually. I just quit my job as a management consultant. Did that for a long time. And so in 2009, a lot of stuff changed in my life. I got divorced. That's number one. And I also decided to stop doing what I was doing for the management consulting firm, simply because more and more I couldn't find myself, less and less I couldn't find myself in their methods anymore. I was doing work with clients, strategic work, and I would see them have success, but it was you know, it was limited in my opinion. I saw them doing things that were good while we were doing it, but then like 3 months later, when I would go back, they would go back to old ways of working. Uh,
Well, I don't know if you can hear us, Rich, but I think you've just stuttered just as you were getting
mhm.
into your story.
Did
Oh,
I?
I've got you back now. Yeah, go on.
So the way, where do you want me to start?
Uh, so I think you were saying you weren't making any money. You were working for a management
Ah,
consultancy. You left because you couldn't see yourself working in their methods anymore.
yeah, yeah, yeah. So that's and I left, and I would not recommend it to anybody. By the way, that's it's kind of a steep uh, slope to climb there. So and I started working with people that you and I know. I hired Steve Chandler in that in that year as my coach, and so slowly but steadily, I started getting clients. But it was absolutely in the beginning, it was, I never understood why they weren't calling me. I was like, I have all this stuff to share. Why aren't they calling me? But I was just still learning a lot because it was so different than what I was used to do. As a consultant, at least when you work for a firm, it's like, okay, this is your next assignment, this is your next client, this is the scope, go do it. And now there was no client, nobody calling me, there was no scope, there wasn't even a hint of a client, there was nothing, and that was totally new. So I had to relearn that whole process, and I would say it cost me about, honestly, I think 2 to 3 years before it really got going. And really got going, I mean, making what, 40, 50,000 a year. That took me about 2 to 3 years. And, it wasn't even that, it was like a continuous evaluation. It was more like a quantum leap. So at a certain moment, I got in contact with a couple of people in the company, and they said, can you help us coach some people? And we coached some people. Well, I coached some people, and then they said, oh, and we also want to change the culture. Can you help us with that? So it went from 0 to 1 to 3 to 4 individual clients, and then it went to my big corporation, the corporation, and that really jump started it. And what they don't know, which I probably never told them, is that they basically paid for my education as a coach. I made a lot of mistakes. I was still a little bit arrogant back then. It's still here every now and then, thinking that I know everything. And I paid the price. Clients left, and but I guess I needed that to learn how to do this because it's so different from working as a consultant. And but it really from there, I got wiser and better, and I got more practice, and that really got me to um, bigger clients, longer clients, more renewals, more referrals, and and that's where I am today, basically. But
Yeah,
it was quite a journey, and it still is.
I'm just writing some stuff down because I think you really hit on something there that it took time,
Hmm.
right? So it took time for you to get there. It wasn't a case of, oh, you hung your shingle out and all of a sudden you had clients coming to you. It's time, and I say this now, and I've been saying this more and more when I speak to coaches. I don't know a single coach personally who started coaching and then their business took off straight away. Every single person, it seems to be typically 2 or 3 years, it's or more. It
Yeah.
seems to be several years for them, plugging away, sticking to it, taking their time, experimenting, trying stuff out, failing, for them to grow and really get it going. And it sounds like
Yeah.
you're no exception to that.
Yeah, I think it even took longer than most people, Ankush, to be honest, because I worked with Steve Chandler a lot, and he even at a certain moment he sent me a book by Larry Wiggett. It's called "You're Broke Because You Want to Be," and I took that as a hint, like, what am I not doing? So what I was doing, what didn't work, was I would stay home, hoping that by email I could get a client, or I would do webinars and nobody would call me. But it really started off when I started hustling. I would say that, right? So hustling means I would go into the world. I would find people and I would say, hey, aren't you with a Rotary or something? Can I talk about something during one of your next meetings? And they would say, yeah, because they love speakers. They're looking for speakers all the time. So it's then when it really started working. You know, I went to Chamber of Commerce, Rotary, when I decided to out of this comfortable home and especially out of this comfortable head and really start putting stuff out there because that's where you learn. You know, you cannot learn how to ride a bike from a book, Ankush. You know how the bike works theoretically, but riding a bike, it's falling, getting up, and getting out of your own way quicker, sooner, and not hurting yourself as much. That's the whole deal. But you have to fall down. You cannot learn this by just staying home.
So, and you cut out a little bit, but I think I got the gist of it there. That
Mm,
you said what really changed for you was Steve very subtly, pointing something out that you weren't seeing, and
yeah,
and you went out and as you called hustled, and you went and actually what I hear is you went and actually spoke to people. You went and
yeah,
you made yourself more visible to people that might hire you, and you let them know what
yeah,
you know, and you gave them an experience of you.
yeah. Well,
And
give me a second. My children are crying. I have to close the door. Just a second.
no problem.
I'm still here.
Yeah, that's okay. And what I would say, this is a good opportunity. If you're watching, click the like button. Give us some love hearts. Let us know that you're watching, and if you've got any questions for Rich or myself, please do type them in the comment box below. This is a really good opportunity for you to pick Rich's brain, which is, he's got 10 years of experience coaching. As I said at the start of this, he's got a very successful coaching and consultancy practice. He's someone that I'm looking forward to learning more from on this call as well. Um, Niels has said it sounds like it's about coming out of the closet as a coach, and that's something that Steve Chandler and I talked about a few years ago when we did our event in London. Um, that so many coaches are in the closet. They don't really let the world know that they're a coach. Would you say that's kind of an apt analogy for you or a metaphor?
Yeah, I definitely think so. Yeah. So, you don't get a contract by being the best kept secret of your city or your area, right? So you have to actually go out there and fail, right? But failing is actually the way forward to start to see what is of service to people and what is really helpful. And that's the only way where you can find it in the world, not inside of your head.
Now, I've got so many questions for you. So if we don't get questions from the group, which I hope we do, please do ask any questions that you might have. I've got a ton for you. Now, you said you had a coach. It
Mhm.
sounds like you had a coach from very early on. What was the impact of having a coach? Because you hear all these coaches say, have a coach. I talk about the impact of having a coach.
Yeah.
You don't coach coaches. You've got no vested interest in people hiring a coach or not. What was the
No,
impact for you of hiring a coach?
it was the best thing I've ever done, to be honest, because it's so valuable to have somebody who gently points you towards certain directions, give you different perspectives, is there for you when you're stuck in your own thinking. It's not a coincidence that I'm still working with Steve. We're 10 years down the road and still we talk, not as much as in the beginning, but a coach is just somebody who points you in the right direction when you get lost. And especially in this thing that we do, coaching, consulting, it can be very lonely, right? It can be very lonely sitting on your own desk thinking, well, where does my next client come from? I have a talk next week. What am I going to do? So if you have somebody who reflects with you, and not maybe your brother reflects or your mother reflects, but a coach knows exactly where to reflect. That's just invaluable, and it gets you unstuck quicker, and it accelerates your development. And I would say the most important thing with a coach is find a coach that you have a click with, that you trust. Um, because that for me was always the most important thing. Steve was not my only coach. I've had more coaches, but it was just the click that was so important. Because if you have a really good coach, you're going to lay a lot of things bare. You're going to say a lot. You're not going to talk about the business, but also about at a certain moment, maybe about your insecurities or your doubts. And, it's really helpful. That would be very important, I think. And it's invaluable. Are we still here? I can't hear you.
Sorry, I'm muted. I was saying
Ah,
that that's really clever, isn't it? I was saying every 5 minutes or so, your connection gets a bit fuzzy. But yes, I
okay.
think the gist of what you were saying was, for you, a coach has been invaluable, and
Yeah.
it's important to have a coach that you click and connect with. And I often say to people that coaching is so intimate. It's such an intimate conversation, and we're so careful about who we pick to cut our hair, or you know, any personal service that we have, or any services that we have in our lives. We don't just look at, or most people don't just look at price. There's a relationship there, and coaching is kind of so much more intimate than those services.
Mm-hmm.
So I totally agree with you.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you said you made a lot of mistakes. Would you be willing to share what some of those mistakes were? Maybe we can learn from your experience.
The legal ones, you mean?
And all and any mistakes.
Um, well, one of my first client, my first one-on-one client, I still remember. I was in Amsterdam with my wife, and 2 days before that, I had sent him a proposal for 10 coaching sessions. That was my first client. So, and then he sent me an email, let's do this. And I was so happy. I was just so happy. And I showed my wife and we went shopping. was it was like we won the lottery, right? But for me, it was like a confirmation, like, okay, this can work. This I can make a living this way. So it was more than just a simple contract. It was a confirmation of everything I've been doing. But the third session, I thought I had a lot of rapport with the guy. So I was the old consultant again that I was when I was doing my consulting work. So I just hit him. I was very straight. I was very in his face. And after that, he canceled the contract. Can you still hear me, by the way?
I can. I'm just smiling listening to you.
Okay, good. So he canceled the contract, and I was like, oh, what happened? And as much as it was an exhilarating moment when he signed on, it was such a bad experience when he canceled the contract, and it took me a couple of weeks to understand why. But eventually, my coach pointed out to me. He said, "Did you have an agreement with the guy that this is the way he wanted to be coached?" And I was like, "No, I was just being the old me. I was just rich in your face because I was paid for that when I was a consultant." And he said, "Not gonna work if you do it like that." I was like, "Oh," and I felt such a failure. And the same thing happened in that same year. I was running a mastermind group, 4 people, 4 entrepreneurs in a mastermind group, and one of them canceled on a certain day, and then the day after that, I got another cancellation, and I was like, "What happened?" And I looked back, and again, it was me running my ego with them, telling them what to do without rapport. So the rapport thing is a big, has been a big lesson for me. So every now and then, I still can assume that I have rapport, but now I just press the brakes when I do that. So that's one of my biggest errors, and it cost me a lot of money. Um, you want me to go on?
Yeah, this is great. I'm feeling so much better about myself hearing about your
Yeah.
mistakes.
Yeah, yeah. I wish they were just hypothetical, but they really aren't. Um, let's see. One of the one of the biggest mistakes. This is by the way, my second company that I started. The first one, um, it kind of went into bankruptcy when I started to buy a lot of stuff for the company. So I bought a laptop. To be prepared. So I bought a Beamer. I made arrangements with a hotel to come there with my customers. And I didn't have any clients, but I was still in that wishful thinking kind of mode. Like, once they come in bunches, but they didn't. And of course I had a lot of cost in the company and I couldn't pay them anymore. And that's when I had to, call bankruptcy on that company. It wasn't a big company. It had, I don't know, 12,000 in revenues, I guess. But, I was just building this big back end, and didn't work. Didn't work. So what I learned from that was that the only thing that counts is, and this is basically the question that I run through my mind every day: who can I serve? And without starting to build everything around that, who can I serve? Find somebody to serve, and from there, see when you want to take the business. I would say that's, as a beginning coach, especially, don't take on all kinds of debts and all that stuff. Just serve. They need you. They don't need a Beamer or a fancy laptop or a presentation. That's another mistake I made. I went into a chamber of commerce once. 18 entrepreneurs wanting to hear what I had to say. And I went in and I did a 80 slide presentation. And afterwards, I wondered why nobody had heard me. And afterwards in the feedback, I heard that it was very theoretical, it was not connected with them. And that was a big lesson for me too. Because it's all about the connection, it's all about the rapport. And in the beginning, I thought it was about showing them how smart I am, how much I know of the human condition, how much theories I know. But it's much, much, much more simpler than that. It's just finding somebody, finding out how to serve them, and then do that as good as you can. You don't have to be perfect. But that's been very humbling for me. Very, very humbling, considering where I'm coming from, where I was this $800 an hour consultant, and you would be happy if I would come in. That was basically how they sold me. And now I have to be at a certain, like 10 years ago, I had to be very humble. And those were big lessons. And I wouldn't have learned them if I would have stayed at home. They were, I have this metaphor that I love, or this distinction rather. It's being in the stands or on the field. Right? So most people are in the stands watching the game, and they have all kinds of opinions and things that they think the player should have done. But it actually makes no difference at all what you think in the stands. It doesn't have any impact on the eventual game. So what has impact is being on the field. And on the field, you don't have time to analyze. You don't have time to see what you should have done. You're just in the game. You're playing the game, and you're doing it as good as you can, being as present as you can. And that's in this business. If you're not in the game, you're in the stands. And in the stands, it's intellectual and it doesn't get you anywhere.
Thanks for that. I'm just going to turn my video off for you. The group will be able to see my video, but I think it should make the connection a bit stronger. Thanks for that. We've got a question from Niels, and please do give us more questions. It kind of makes this more interesting for all of us. So, question Niels has got: how do you go about approaching a company? Do you look for someone in HR, or do you go directly to the higher ups? Niels is a coach who I believe you have interacted with a little bit, but he's much more of a newer coach. So what would you suggest?
Well, it depends. If there's an HR person interested, then you speak with HR person. But then when the HR person, for instance, says, we have a problem with stress in this company. What you want to do, you never make a proposal for them. You come to an agreement what you want to work on, but then you ask that HR person, for who's going to approve a project that we're going to do, who has to sign the contract, and then you want to be introduced to the one who has the budget, basically, right? So that's also a mistake I made in the beginning. Don't ever make a proposal with money or anything else in it to somebody who doesn't have a budget. So the short answer to that is anybody business be introduced to them, because you don't want to make a proposal, give it to the HR person, and then the HR person is going to tell what you propose to their boss. That's not communicating well. That's also not professional. So be introduced, take the HR person to the introduction if they want to be. But um, yeah, that I would say that's the best practice in this. So talk to anybody, see if they're serious, see how you can serve them, and then ask to be introduced to the one who's going to approve the contract.
Niels, again, I know there was a little um, uh, problem there with the connection, but let us know if that answered your question, and has that been helpful to you? But again, my paraphrasing that is, it really doesn't matter. Talk to anyone, serve them as you would do with any client, but ultimately within a company you want to be speaking to the person who's actually going to pay the bill, and they need
Yeah,
to be on board with what you're doing, and often that is not HR.
yeah. HR doesn't have a budget for that. It's often in the business, somebody in the business.
So, Rich, I've got a question for you, kind of following up with that. Um,
Mm.
when you started out, and the initial clients you had, were they people that you knew already? Were they people who got to know you after you started coaching? In terms of, were these people that you went out and said, "Hey, I'm a coach. I'm a coach." You talked to Chamber of Commerce. You did these talks, and from that they got to know you, or
Mm.
were these members of your network anyway?
Most of them I got to know through this hustling, what I said, right? So finding speaking assignments. Some that my really early clients came from that. Um, my clients after that came when I started to organize my own masterminds. So what I would do is I would set up a business mastermind, and then I would invite a couple of people to that. With this is what we're going to do. Are you interested? So people I didn't know. Um, what I also did is I organized my own trainings, and people who were on my mailing list. I had a short mailing list in those days, like 100 people on it. So I would invite them to come. They would have to spend, like, I don't know, 25 euros, and they could spend a whole day, and we would talk about business and about strategies and about all that stuff. By the way, it's not what I do these days anymore, but it was in those days. So my clients would come from that. I was invited to speak for conferences here in my country, in Amsterdam, for the biggest real estate conference, and people flocked to me from there. So they would come to me, ask for my business card, and I would just interact with them. So yeah, that's where they came from. But let's see, my old network from the consulting firm. I never approached them. That's number one, because I thought that was not ethical, but that was just my interpretation. Doesn't mean that that's true. But most of them came from what I created in the world when I went out in the world and when I started creating masterminds and all that stuff. Um, yeah, so mostly for new people.
Okay, that's good to know. Niels has come back. The short answer fell away, but that makes a lot of sense. I have an idea. I was warned that the CEO was really a hard ass and very much money minded, yet the company needs to have a culture shift or they'd be in trouble financially. Um, Niels, could you just expand on this? Is this someone who you'd like to coach? Is this a company you'd like to coach? And if there's a question in there, if you could kind of phrase that as a question, that would be helpful. Um,
Yes.
do do you? I kind of know the answer to this, but I'd love you to answer this. Do you feel that there's a demand for coaches with this understanding within large corporations?
Yes, and they don't know it. That's the short answer. So yes, there's a huge demand because companies are suffering, Ankush. They're suffering. They have stress, they have overwhelm, they have bad meetings, they have miscommunication, they have projects that run out of budget, out of scope, out of time, um, burnout, even worse, even worse, people who leave the jobs. So this, um, they don't want to look. I don't know. Most leaders that I speak to have done an MBA or a business school or any kind of higher education. So they've been taught various ways of getting things done. So they look into the area of harder work, smarter work, better strategies, redesigning the processes. The familiar ways that they get taught in business school and by experience. They're not used to looking into the direction in which I'm and you also are pointing, which is another dimension of human beings. So they don't know that that's a way for higher performance. So you have to be very smart and very creative to bring that under their attention. Because if you go in and you say, "Hey, listen, you really need this, but you don't know it," they will close the door before you even finish that sentence, right? So you have to find a way for them to get interested. And what they're always interested in is direct results, practical things. So what I always want to know when I go into a business, I would know, so what is the problem right now? What would really elevate your performance that you could solve that? The famous question about a magic wand. If you could wave a magic wand, what would you change? What would you get rid of? Or what would you do? And then you have to find what really keeps them asleep, right? And once you have that, you have to find a way in your own mind to translate what you have in such a way that it speaks in their world, right? So if you go in and you talk about spiritual principles and stuff like that, they think they don't need that. They actually think that that's fluffy. They think that's soft. So you have to find a way in your own words, and it's very important in your own words to translate what you have for them, so that it translates into their world. That means something for them. A good friend of mine always says, you have to find the bacon. What's the bacon for them, right? So if you want to, for instance, if you want to, if you have a dog, you want to feed him a pill, he doesn't eat the pill, but yeah, if you wrap the pill in bacon, he will eat it, right? So you give him the bacon, he likes the bacon, and he takes the pill that will make him better. So in business, you have to find what's the bacon for them, and then you slip in the pill so that they get the bacon, and in the meantime, they get better at everything they do. So that's the best way to do that, I think. And I'm open to new opportunities, but most people don't see that they need this. So they keep looking in the direction that they've always been looking in, and that's very limited. It's very limited. And just look at every business. They're rushed. They're overwhelmed. And yeah, of course they make a profit, but it's not sustainable. So in an up market, that's easy. That the pain is hidden. But when the markets go down, they suffer, and they suffer the consequences of not looking in this direction that I'm talking about, and also you, Ankush, I know in your work. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes sense to me. And I guess what you're trying to, what I hear, and I know Mark Howard talks about this, is, again, it's coming back to the rapport thing, being on the same page, and talking about what you know. And I guess what I'm hearing you saying, correct me if I'm wrong, is, if the most important thing to a business is increasing the bottom line, improving the bottom line, right, making more money in essence,
Mm-hmm.
and you go in and say, hey, I want to teach you some spiritual principles which will tell you about the money is all an illusion and you don't need it, you're not going to get hired, because, and rightly so, because it's not respect, in my words, these are my words, I don't think it's very respectful to someone to say, hey, I'm right, you're wrong, and you need to pay me money to teach you that you're wrong, right?
Yeah.
And what I'm hearing you say is, actually, any problem that they've got, actually, if they had a better understanding of how the mind worked, that would help them alleviate that problem. So let's
Exactly.
say,
Yeah.
okay, we want to improve the bottom line. If you ask someone enough questions, you'll start to notice what misunderstandings they have,
Hmm.
which are getting in their way of improving their bottom line. If they've got a stress problem, right? If you ask them enough questions, you'll help them understand the real source of stress and quite how easily to change that. And the same thing is with the culture shift. With all these things that I hear that companies are really looking for, um,
Hmm.
it's about connecting the dots back from what they're
Yeah.
looking for to actually what we know. And I think that's really true of all coaching clients. You know, if you're coaching someone who doesn't know about the three principles, which is pretty much all of my clients, at least when they start working with me, and sounds like all of yours, then we've got to connect those dots for them and
Hmm.
say, well, what's really important to you? Okay, now can I help you with that?
Yes.
As opposed to,
Yeah. And
I need to teach you something.
yeah, and connecting some dots back to a question you asked me before. You as a coach, you cannot be put down by anything they say simply because they don't understand it, right? So if they say, I don't need you or whatever, you have to be the clearest person in the room in order to be very creative with your client. So, and that's when you need a coach. A coach can help you reflect back on that. A coach can help you be the best version of yourself so that you, when you're with that CEO or vice president or managing director or whatever you're speaking to, you cannot be disappointed for 3 days when somebody tells you, I don't know what you can do for me. Because the one thing that has helped me really a lot is whenever somebody says, I don't see how you can help me, I would say, okay, so let's find a way to help you see, right? And that's where a coach can help you so much in being that best version of yourself. Because if you're not that best version of yourself, you're very limited in how you can help a guy like that or a girl like that, right? So if you're on your own, it's pretty rough out there. These people, they don't have an idea what you're talking about most of the time. So it really helps if you can go back and say, hey, I did this. And then you have somebody on the other side of the room, of the phone, who takes you back to your grounding, calms you down, and makes you actually have insights about what you can do differently next time. Because otherwise it's just, you're just going to feel victimized every time. If you want to work in the world of business, of course.
Yeah, and I think this is probably wider than that. I know when I work with my clients and we run, some scenarios through of what they've said to their clients, just not because I'm Superman or super coach or anything, just because I'm not so attached to it, I can see things, and that's exactly the same thing that happens with my coach when I do the same thing.
Hmm. Yeah.
So this is really helpful. This is really useful. Um, you posted something recently about moving your business in a different direction. Could you tell us more about that?
Yeah, sure. Yeah. Yeah. This is very, this is very inspiring for me to talk about this. So, um, I've been working in business for a long, long time, and getting great results. People get great results everywhere. Not everywhere. I'm going to be honest. It's not all the time. Sometimes people just don't want to hear. Um, but what I realized recently, after having a conversation with one of my colleagues, was that bringing this understanding into a business really can help them. Um, but I want to bring it more towards the companies that also want to make a difference in the world. And I'm talking about not the companies that say, okay, we want to make a difference, and then they don't do it, but the companies that say, hey, we're making a good profit here, but we also want to make a difference socially. We want to make a difference for the people that work for us. We want to make a difference for the community. We want to make a difference for the environment. Companies that really, really mean that. I want to give them this technology that I'm teaching to the other companies. Why? Because I think if when they have that, they can make an even bigger difference in the world. So I'm more and more getting away from the clients who just used it to get a bigger profit, or to get more cost savings of that, or like that. I'm trying to shift away from those clients, and I'm more and more bringing this understanding to the companies that really want to make a difference in the world. And that's been a change of heart, because for a long time this work was about my own survival, about my income, But at the moment, it doesn't matter that much anymore. I'm good. I'm fine. I know I can get 3 clients by the end of the month if I make some calls, and that's not arrogance. It's just I know that I can do that, if I do it effectively, of course. But I don't want to do it everywhere anymore. And that was what my company was about for a long, long time. Just whoever called, I would help them. But now I'm shifting towards the companies that really want to make a difference in the world, and there are some really nice prospects that we're talking to right now. Really looking forward to them. One of them is one of the biggest food companies in the world, who are doing a lot of social projects. So that's the shift. That's the change of heart that I had recently, and I communicated out into the world so that people would hold me to it, and people like you would ask me questions. But that's the direction I'm taking it right now, and yeah, it's really inspiring for me to do that.
Well, thanks for sharing that, and I know there was a lot of interest in that post that you put out about it.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to try and do, and if you've got any questions on that, please let me know. Niels has got a follow-up question, and I'm going to try and do something. I'm trying to add him to this. We'll see if this works,
Mm-hmm.
and see if we can add him to this webinar, and maybe he can join us. Although it didn't work. Because so Neil said there is a governmental company nearby that has expressed that they have a group of employees that need to change the way they work with clients. At the moment, they are stuck and not getting any results anymore. The responsible alderman has expressed that they need to change to a client-based approach on the work floor, or there would be consequences. I would love to help change that. However, the CEO who is responsible for and manages the budget is rather unapproachable. I was wondering if Rich has any tips on how to approach a company like that.
Yeah, so who exactly says that this group has a problem? Who has that opinion?
Niels, are you on the call?
Yeah, I am. I think so. You hear me?
Hi, Niels. Yep.
Ah,
I
good.
can hear you. Yep.
So, yeah, it's the alderman, or in Dutch, the wethouder. He's
Okay.
responsible, so he kind of governs that budget, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of a complicated situation, but we're in the same political party, and I do lots of work for the party.
Mm-hmm.
And he expressed to me the whole situation that they had going on there on the work floor, and that they really need to go about it in a different way. That they were very result focused, and they got the people on the work floor got a lot of easy hits, so to speak. But they've got a clientele base that's really stuck, and they're really set in their ways, and the coaches that I have on the work floor, they just can't get them to move.
Mm-hmm.
And they're really struggling because they're really focused on getting results and not on the clients. And the alderman has expressed that they need to change their way of approaching it.
Mm-hmm.
Otherwise, they're going to lose the company, so to speak.
Mm.
And yeah, especially for my hometown, it would be a big loss.
Yeah, I can imagine. Yeah.
But like I said, the CEO is a really tough person to approach, and he kind of warned me that it was really difficult to get in touch, and like you can try, but it's really hard to get any conversation going there. So it was like, okay, where do I approach? How do I approach that?
So exactly, what's the role of the alderman then? You said he has a budget. Could he be paying you?
That maybe, but that was very, very, very unlikely. Very unlikely.
Okay, so without knowing a lot about the situation, here's what I would do. Whenever,
Yeah.
you know,
Still there?
Hey, Rich, can
Niels?
you still hear us? We just lost you for a
Yes,
second.
There
yes,
you go. Yeah.
I am here. Yeah. So can I try to give an answer?
Yeah.
Okay. So what I would do
Hmm?
in that situation, I would say, put them in the room. And let's do a half-day session, 4-day session. No, sorry, 4-hour session, not a 4-day session. And because I think I have something that can help, but I don't know, A, if it helps, and B, if it resonates with you. But let's run a little experiment and let's see if it works. You're not going to pay me for it, but if you like it, we can talk if you want more of that, because there's always more that I can help you with. So, because you can talk until you see blue in the face, right, about this stuff, and they won't
Yeah.
get it anyway on an intellectual level. But why not demonstrate to them what you can do? And then, of course, when you have that appointment in the agenda, you have to be creative about what you're going to do. But that's the least of your concerns when you're coaching. You can help them. So could you get them in a room for 4 hours, 3.5 hours, 4 hours in the morning, have nothing else on their mind, no phones, no laptops, just you with them, getting in a conversation so that they finally get heard. That's very important for people, and that they can start communicating about what really bothers them.
Mm.
And then afterwards, you can ask them, hey, is there anything else that I can help you with? Because I believe, now that I know what you're struggling with, that I can help you even deeper. And then you can, of course, talk about a contract.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess so. Yeah, that sounds really, yeah, kind of straightforward, but really effective. Yeah.
Yeah, and Niels, nobody works like that. Everybody wants to get paid before they do something.
Right.
But that's what makes us different. We give, the moment somebody calls me, I start serving. I just immediately start organizing something for them. I send them a book. I have a coaching call with them, and I don't worry about getting paid. I just worry about helping them, because I know if I really help them, that will take care of itself.
Yeah. That makes sense. Yeah, I just need to find some way to get a conversation going. Yeah, because the impression I got from the alderman was that the CEO really is like just extremely budget minded, and if anything costs a penny, then it's a immediate no go. So
Yeah.
yeah,
So then you have to find what is worth something to him.
right. Yeah.
But if you start with the people who you can serve now, so he sounds like a tough cookie for now, right? So maybe a bridge too far. But if you can start serving his people, those are his people, right? Or not?
Yeah, but I don't think he's very involved on the ground floor, if that's what you mean.
Yeah, but if he starts seeing a difference with them, he might get curious.
Yeah.
And you never know. That's the beauty, of course. You never know. There's no certainty that he will see it and say, hey, can we pay this guy? But if you really want to help them and you're really committed to serving, why not help the people who are available now, who are suffering right now? And then, I've had people, seriously, that I worked with for a day, pro bono, and I didn't hear of them for 3 years. And then they called me and they said, hey, listen, I got this new vice president position in this company. I would like you to train 2,600 people.
Wow.
And that was 3 years later, right?
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah. So you never know how it works out. But I know for sure that the best strategy is, how can I serve right now? And if the CEO is right now out of reach or cynical or whatever, see what you can do.
Makes sense. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's great. Great answer. Thanks, man. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Yeah, thanks for joining us, Niels,
Thank
and
you.
asking that question. That was very illuminating. We've got about 10 minutes left, so if anyone else has got a question for myself or for Rich, please do ask it. It makes these conversations so much more interactive and interesting, rather than just having me ask all the questions. And there might be something that I take for granted, or something that I don't consider to ask. So please do ask any questions you have. Rich is not in the Facebook group. Like I said, he's very busy flying all over the place normally. So we're lucky to have an hour of his time today, and be able to ask him all this stuff. Rich, one thing that was really interesting in what you said to Niels was that, when someone reaches out to you, you just start serving, and most coaches want to get paid first. Could you say more about that, and some examples around how you serve?
Yeah. So when somebody gets in contact with me, I just immediately ask myself the question, how can I help? What can I do? And that, sometimes that looks like, sometimes it's just a conversation. But for instance, in the example of Niels, it would be like, okay, so you're talking about this group. Why not put them in a room together and let's talk for 4 hours. I have some ideas that might help. I could serve in that way, or I'd send them a book or anything else. It's just, I never, and this was different, by the way, when I started, but right now, I never think about, am I going to get paid, or am I going to get paid enough? What I first do is I demonstrate to them, what can I do? And also sometimes, Ankush, this is a side benefit. Sometimes I do like an awareness session for a group, like a 4-hour session. And then afterwards, I'm like, no, I don't want to work with this group. This is not a group that I like. I don't like the energy. I don't like the people. This is a bridge too far. So it's also for me a way to see if I want to work with that group. But I just give that away everywhere. I give books away. I give, calls and I do that all the time. I don't do it for somebody who comes back for the 20th call, right? I have a limit. But I believe that most coaches, indeed, like you said, are mostly focused on how can I get a client. But the client it doesn't work that way, that if they pay first and then they get what you have, you first have to show them that you have something that they want. That's such a much better business model than the greedy one, where you first have to pay and then they're going to do something for you.
But Brian's got a practical question. What book do you send them, or what books typically do you send to corporate clients?
Well, that depends what they're struggling with. So in my beginning days, I'd send out the E-Myth. Do you know that book? It's for starting for entrepreneurs with small companies. The E-Myth by, I don't know his name anymore, but it's really a practical book for entrepreneurs. I send out Robert Cialdini books. I did that in the past a lot, but I really look for something that connects with what they're worrying about in that moment. So if somebody's struggling with, I don't know, let's say insecurities or stress, I just send them something about that. And it's not always a book. It can be an article, a McKinsey article, or a Boston Consulting Group article, or anything like that. Really something that helps. Or it can be a YouTube video. It can be a TEDx talk. But really something that fits for what they told me, not something general. I sent out a lot of Steve Chandler books in the past. When somebody said that they were overwhelmed, I would send them Time Warrior by Steve Chandler, for instance. and the most important thing is without expecting something back. That's the killer. If you think if I send out this book and it's costing me $11, but hopefully I get a contract back, don't do it. Just send it because you want to help. That's the big mind shift you want to make there.
Final question from Rosie. Was there a time when you didn't believe you were good enough to serve corporate clients?
All the time. Constantly, of course. Everybody has moments when they doubt themselves and when they think, oh, my program is not that good or whatever. But the most important thing is that if and the best thing to get out of that mindset, I'm not good enough, just serve. Start, instead of feeling insecure, start thinking, who can I help today? Open your email box. Look for people that once mailed you and get in contact with them. Ask them, how are you? That will get you out of that self-doubt. So yeah, I have that all the time. When I'm now working with a guy, he's leading about 16,000 people. I'm meeting him tonight, actually. And when I first met him, he seemed like a very tough kind of guy in your face. When he talked to me, he stood like 10 centimeters away from my face, and he said to me that he didn't like all this fluffy stuff. That's what he literally said. And right now we're friends. We're friends. And not because I gave in to my self-doubts, but because I just kept serving him. Even when I had no idea how to serve him, I would just ask him what would be really helpful to get out of our conversation as a starting question. And then you would get people talking. So yeah, all the time. So what? If it rains outside, I just wear a raincoat. Doesn't mean I don't go outside, Hope that answers the question, Rosie.
Yeah, let us know, Brian and Rosie, if that's answered your questions. And just quickly to go back to Brian's thing, there are so many things that you can send to clients. Rich, you've talked about a bunch of books there. Many of them not 3P based, but stress. George Pransky's got a wonderful series of videos on YouTube that are free on stress. In terms of business, Rich has got an interview that he did with me about business on iTunes and on YouTube, and I've created a bunch there. I mean, there literally are so many things. Michael Neal's TEDx talk is great. Jamie Smart's got a bunch of resources. There are now so many things from so many different people that we can send. And if you've got a particular client and you're unsure what to send them, you can always ask in this group. So that's an option. Rosie says, thank you. Great answer. So that's really helped her. And we're pretty much getting up to the hour now. So
can I add something, Ankush, to Brian?
Yeah, sure.
And Brian's question. So what was really helpful for me is just not, if you have something like an article or a video or a podcast, send it to them and tell them that you were thinking about them and that this would hopefully help them. And if they're interested, there's more that you can help them with that's based on that specific type of material. Always invite them. Always invite them.
That's really helpful and really useful. Thank you so much for doing this, Rich. We're pretty much out of time now, but I like I said, I really appreciate your time and your knowledge and information. If people watch this on the replay and if they've got questions for you, are you open to receiving questions or not?
Of course, yeah, they can email me. Yeah, no problem.
What's your email address?
Let's say that's richard@richardhabets.com. That's the best one, I think. I read that one the most.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you again for your time. Thank you for doing this. I will. This is up in the group now. It's live. It's Facebook Live, and we'll eventually get it up on our YouTube channel as well. So, thank you for spending your time. Thank you for helping the community.
Well, you're welcome, and thank you, Ankush, for the invitation.
You're most welcome.
Thank you.
And Brian says thank you, and Rosie says thank you. Look forward to the replay since I missed most of it.
Okay, good.